Hi everyone, and welcome to this new Curvy Splines tutorial. So today's tutorial will be about connections, which are basically a link between multiple splines. So to give you an example here, we can see that we have a first spline and a second one. Both of them having 3 control points, and we connected the middle control point of both splines. So but now if we move one of those control points, the other moves too. So this is just one example of the multiple usages we have with connections. But before speaking about what you can do with connections beyond that, let's start by speaking about how you can create one. You have mainly 2 ways to create connections through the Unity editor. Of course, you can create them through the API too. So the first way is when you have splines already created and you want to connect them. So let's remove all this, and so for example, I have these 2 splines. So if I want to connect some specific control points on those splines, I just select the control points I want. Here I selected 2, but it can be more, and on more than 2 splines. And then you click on this button, create a connection, and now you have a connection. So like the connected control points have this gizmo, like this sphere around the control point. And the color has a meaning that I will explain when I will speak about what you can do with connections. But yeah, so what you have to keep in mind right now is that you can create it this way, and you can see in the hierarchy that the connected control points have like this icon next to them, and also that creates a connection game object, because basically a connection is an instance of a script, a mono behavior called Curvy connection. And that instance, when you create a connection through the editor, it will be attached to a new game object that is called connection, and that you can see here in the hierarchy are under Curvy global. And for each connection here, I will select 2 other control points, I will connect them, and for each one of them there is a new connection game object. I will speak in details about the connection inspector and what you can do with this later. So now let's see how we can create a connection through another scenario where you will create the connection at the same time that you are creating the splines. So you create a spline using this tool that was explained in another tutorial, and so this is the normal way of creating a spline. But you can see here that if you right click, you will add a control point and connect it. So what that means is that if I do so, here you can see that we have a connection here, but also this other control point is no more part of the spline I was creating, but part of another spline that you can see here. So this is the first spline, this is the second spline. So basically, when I created this control point, what it did is first create the last control point of my first spline, create a new spline, create the first control point of that new spline, and connect both splines. So yeah, that way, like, you can, while creating a spline, create connections with other splines. And you can also, so if we let's start with another example. In this scenario, I am having sorry, already two splines created, and I will add a new control point from the first spline to and a control point that will be connected with the second spline to any point on the second spline. So for example, so I will do that with the right click like before. So here, like you can see, what it basically did is add into the first spline control point, and in the second spline add in at the position where I had the mouse cursor another control point, which is this one, and then connected both of them. Also keep in mind that you can also like add control points in between like other control points this way. You don't have to add always at the end of the spline. Now that we know how to create a connection, let's see how we can use it. There are various usages. Let's start with the one I showed earlier, which is synchronizing positions. So let's create again a connection, and here so you can see that when I am selecting a control point that has a connection, we have the regular inspector information, and then we have, in addition to that, this connection area. And this area in the inspector is the same than the inspector of the actual connection. So in a connection, you have this control point options that allows you to select the control points that are part of the connection, remove one of them, or all of them if you want, and also if you remove all of them, the connection game object will get automatically destroyed. So still in that same area of the inspector, you have the options regarding synchronization of position and rotation. So here we can say to both control points to synchronize their position. If you have like 3 control points, you can say just those 2 will synchronize. And now that this is done, if I select one of the control points and I move it, the position is synchronized. Same thing if I select the other one, and same thing if I select the connection game object. So, and you have probably noticed that when I put sync position on all the control points, the color changed to red. This is because the color of the gizmo of the connection has convey a meaning. So here you can see the different synchronization presets, and each one of them having a specific color. So if there is absolutely no synchronization, the color is black. Like you can see, I clicked here and all the ticked boxes are unticked now. If I click on the position only, now it becomes red and all the synchronization position boxes are ticked. Similar concept with synchronized rotation. And finally, if you click on synchronize both position and rotation, the gizmo now is white. So yeah, this is about this area of the inspector. Now we have also the follow-up area. I will speak about that later. And then finally the delete connection. It's just equivalent of selecting the connection game object and deleting it. So what's next? Yes, you can use the connections also to define behavior of controllers. So let's create this spline, this spline, this spline. Okay. And now we are having this web of control points. Let's synchronize those. So now they're all linked, and I will create a game object, a cube, and I will add a spline controller to it, and I will put this first spline into the, where is it? Okay, so I will set its spline to this one. Okay, so now the controller will, at the end of the spline, the furthest it can go is the end of the spline, and we can put a relative speed of 1 and ping pong, and if we click on play, so as you can see, let me put this here. Okay, as you can see, the object will just move along the first spline. So now let's tell the controller that if it reaches a connection, it should do something special. So here the default option is stay on the current spline when you reach a connection, but you have various options. You can see all the, like, each option and all its parameters in the documentation. Just click on this icon and you will have a detailed description of all of this. But let's just use, for this example, random spline. So basically it will choose, when reaching a connection, it will just choose a random spline in all the connected splines. So here you can see each time it selects randomly a spline. So yeah, this is another usage of connections. Of course, you can also use connections through the API. So it's the Curvy connection class. So you can create them at runtime and add control points, stuff like that. You can use connections for your still through the API, just for your own game logic. It depends on what you need. So yeah, connection is information attached to the spline in the scene, so you can use it in different ways. But now I will speak about the follow-up thing that you have seen in the inspector before. To understand follow-ups, you have first to understand something about how we compute the shape of a segment. So in the simple case, which is the case of linear interpolation and Bayesian interpolation. So in this simple case, a segment shape is defined only by the two control points that are at its ends. So this one and this one. So yeah, if I move this control point, this segment changes. But if I move those control points that are further away, this segment doesn't change. So this is true for linear and Bayesian interpolation, but for cut-move-ROM and TCB, this is not true. So if I modify this segment, the position of this control point, as you can see, this segment gets modified too. So basically, a segment is defined by both the control points that are at its end, but also the next control point before and after. So the problem with this is that if I connect these two control points, synchronize their position, and automatically the follow-up was added, but to explain to you what follow-ups are, I remove it. I will explain to you how to add it and remove it a little bit later. So here you can see that my first spline is smooth until it reaches the connection, and then you see that there is this it's broken spline. And this happens because this segment, like I said, uses the next control point to define its shape. But the next control point, which is supposed to be this one, right? This one is not part of the first spline, so it doesn't. It is not taken into consideration when defining the shape of this segment. So as you can see, I move this. This doesn't change. And supposedly, if it's like a single spline, if I move this, this will change. So basically, what we are doing in this connection, we are saying that, okay, for this control point, this one, the last one of the first spline, we are saying that this one has a follow-up, which is defined by this other control point that is part of a connection. If you have a connection with multiple control points, you can select the one that is relevant to you. So I'm saying that the follow-up is defined by this control point, which is the first control point of the second spline, and an automatic direction. So automatic is like, it's the simple solution. Normally it smartly chooses what's the right direction to take. But here, as you can see, now that we have set the follow-up, I will explain direction in a moment. If I move this, this segment is also modified, but still it's not the case on the other way. So if I move this segment doesn't change. So to do that, I will just do again what I did with the last control point of the first spline. I will do it with the first control point of the last spline. And now if I modify this changes, and if I move this changes. And now we have two different splines that are connected, but that look like a single spline. So to understand that direction, heading direction option, first let's undo some of the things we did. So let's delete the connection, and now let's move this control point. This one I will connect it to this one. Okay, so let's do that and synchronize position. Okay, so now we have the same problem as before. Let me remove the follow-up. Okay, so we have the same problem as before, and in the first case, in the first case where we connected with this control point, the only next control point, the next one on the spline, on the second spline, is this one. But in this case, we have two next control points depending on which direction we are going. So it can be either this one or this one. So we are either going towards the end of the spline, so it's the first one going towards the end, this one, or it's the first one going towards the beginning of the spline. So this is the beginning of the spline, so this one. And here it's depending on your case, depending on what you want to do and what you are expecting, the right direction for you can be either towards the end or towards the beginning, the start of the spline. So this is where what you can define in this heading direction: two spline starts, two splines end, or nowhere, which basically says that, consider this control point as being the next one. So you stay here. So if I put nowhere, and if I move this, like you can see, this segment doesn't change. So if I change this to splines end, I move this, this change. But if I move this, no, this doesn't change. And same thing if I do to spline start. Now this is the one that is taken into consideration and not this one. So and the automatic option basically tries, depending on the context, to find the right one. It's in most cases it gives a result that you are expecting. But yeah, so I think I spoke about all the aspects of connections. So I hope you found this tutorial that was pretty long, but connections are pretty complex subject, especially the follow-up thing. I hope that you found it useful, and yeah, thanks for watching.